Have you ever spent hours in the kitchen getting a batch of food ready for the canner just to have the whole thing fail on you? Well, that is what happened to me this week, and I am going to share that story with you. What happened is something that I had never thought of before. I didn't realize that this could happen, and it was a simple mistake that could have easily been prevented. So I hope that this video is informative and educational for you, and that you will learn from it, and that this doesn't ever happen to you in your kitchen. So, welcome to Steadfast Homestead. I am Suzanne, where I talk about all things on the homestead: cooking from scratch, canning, gardening, raising animals, and anything and everything else related to the homestead. Today, I am going to talk to you about canning. I have not been in a very good habit of canning on a weekly or bi weekly basis. And that is something that I'm wanting to start to get into more. I am wanting to have some more shelf stable convenience meals ready to go in a jar, especially for my husband's lunch. And I'm also wanting to spend a little more time canning some meat and some beans and just having more convenience items on the shelf, but also for food security reasons, like in a power outage. And we can just simply go to our pantry and still get at least a good protein source. So that is what I had planned on working on last week. I had a couple things in mind that I was going to can, and black beans was one of them. The black beans ended up being my canning disaster, my canning fail. And that is what I want to share with you. So let's get started and figure out what happened. All right, guys, I want to talk to you about my canning fail last week. So my plan was to can black beans. It's not something that we use a lot of, so I usually do some black bean canning about 2 to 3 times a year. I just do one batch, which usually gives me 6 pints, and then that's what I use for taco casseroles. There's a really good Mexican beans and rice soup I make, and then when I make taco soup. So it's really nice. I can just grab one of those jars. They're already soft, no soaking, and ready to go. And canning beans is really easy. Okay, so here's what happened. I had all the jars in the canner ready to go, and we have 5 burners on our stove, and there's one that I've always used for canning. That burner is not quite working right now. It actually doesn't light on its own, so we have to use a lighter for it to get it going. And I didn't have any of that here, but anyways, I got it going. And it doesn't burn as hot as it used to. But I didn't think that was a big deal. So I had my canner on there, and it was building up pressure, but it would never get all the way to pressure. And I know I probably waited an hour and 15 minutes, and it would not get up to pressure. There's a little pressure plug that pops up when it's gotten to pressure, and then I have a weighted gauge canner, and then you put the gauge on, and then it starts ticking or whatever. But it would never get up to pressure. And so after an hour and 15 minutes, I'm like, okay, I think maybe the seal on the canner is probably old and drying out. I should probably just get a new seal. I bet it's not going to even get up to pressure. So I just began to think that the seal on the lid was probably old and dried out and needed to be replaced. We had an issue before that when I still lived at home with my parents, and I've had my canner, I guess, for about 11 years, so I thought, well, maybe that's it. But before I called it quits, I took the canner and I slid it over very gently onto one of the bigger burners. And I didn't like doing that because even though it wasn't built up all the way to pressure, there's still pressure in that canner, and I just don't like messing with it. But I slid it over as gently as I could to one of the more powerful burners. We have a propane gas stove. And within a minute, the plug popped up, it was at pressure, and within 5 minutes, my weighted gauge was ticking, so then I could start my time for the actual 75 minutes that it was going to take me to process the pints. So I started the timer, and I thought to myself, okay, it took so long for it to build up to pressure. I wonder how much water in the bottom of my canner had evaporated in all the boiling. And I thought to myself, okay, if this canner boils up and it's dry, we're going to have problems. But I thought, let's just try it. So the kids and I went out and played in the backyard. It was a nice day. The windows were open, so for the most part, I could hear my weighted gauge ticking back and forth. So we were outside about 30 or 40 minutes, and I come back inside, and the ticker is like this. It's like tick, tick, tick. It's real slow, and it's real quiet. And I'm like, this isn't right. Something is not right. I personally don't like to be up and around the canner too much. I'm not afraid to pressure can, I just don't like to be by it if I don't have to. So I walked up to it, I was looking at it, and I could tell immediately, because I couldn't hear it, there was no water boiling at the bottom. So I'm like, it's boiled down, there's no water in the bottom of the canner anymore, so therefore there's no steam and there's not enough pressure. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, jars are gonna start busting. I've never had a busted jar before, but it's what is going to happen. So I turn off the canner. I'm like, we're done. We're done. So I turn it off, and within a few minutes, the weighted gauge stopped ticking, which is normal. It always stops ticking within a few minutes of turning off the canner. Of course, you don't take it off yet. It's starting to lose pressure, but I always let the canner depressurize 100% on its own. So within 5 minutes, it had stopped ticking, and we were in the kitchen doing things, and then like 5 to 6 or 7 minutes later, it starts ticking again, go real fast and real loud. And then it would stop again. And then 5 or 10 minutes later, it would do the same thing. And just, common sense thinking in my head, I knew what was happening. When you're canning in those jars are actually, as they're sitting in the canner, they're losing air. Like all the oxygen is slowly coming out of them as that seal is slowly getting tighter until it finally clicks and it's sealed. Because you want the oxygen out of your canned goods. Oxygen harbors bacteria. So I knew what was happening. It was those jars were releasing air, and then that's a burst of pressure that was making the weighted gauge go for a few seconds to maybe up to 30 seconds, and then it would stop again. And so I was like, okay, who knows how long this is going to take to depressurize, because it's all of these jars are going to be, their oxygen seeping out is causing these bursts of pressures. So I just packed up the kids and went to my mom's for about an hour, and because I knew it was safe, the canner, the house, it was safe. So I come back home, it had depressurized, I take the lid off, and it's like bone dry at the bottom and gooey, because there was black beans, and none of the jars busted. That was good though, but it was definitely a fail. I have had now 2 canning fails in my life. One was when I was beginning to understand canning, and I was tightening the lids too much, because they can't be too tight, because again then that oxygen can't get out at all. I was tightening them too much, and then the lids were like bursting up in the canner because they couldn't get the oxygen out. So this is my second fail, and my lesson learned is that you do want a burner that is powerful enough. Now we have some other burners that are a lot more powerful, but I don't want it to be too much, which is why I didn't use any of them. But there was a middle one that worked really well. So I do consider it a canning fail, but it was also a good lesson, and I think that it might happen to someone else, and hopefully it doesn't. I'm sure in the canning book, which I probably need to look into mine, it probably tells you the strength of the burner that you need. I'm sure it's in BTUs or whatever, but again, since our burner wasn't actually working correctly, I don't know what the strength of it is. The burner that I used is the one that I always used in the past. It's not getting as hot as it used to, so I guess it just wasn't enough to get the canner up to pressure. And then it just took too long and boiled out too much water. So now I know to just use a different burner from now on, and Hopefully this video may help someone, but I also just like to share the fails as well, because not everything works, and on social media you usually see the bright sides of everything. That's one of the things that I really do like about YouTube, is you do see a lot more fails. People are much more open about sharing, hey, this didn't work in our home. So what did I do with the black beans? I just put them into the fridge. I put the jars into the fridge because they were still kind of warm, and then they're still in there now, and I'm going to take them out and just put them into Ziploc bags and freeze them from there.